Welcome to the AI New York and Center for Architecture. My name is Jesse Lazar. I'm the executive director here at both AI New York and Center for Architecture. And we're so happy to welcome you to tonight's screening of Frank Gehry, Building Justice. And we hope you will also look forward to joining us for a discussion about it as well. This program was planned jointly by two of our AI New York committees. For those of you who are not familiar, AI New York is a membership organization with about 5,000 professional members here based in and around Manhattan. And we have a couple dozen committees that plan most of the wonderful programming and events that you see here. We're especially thrilled when those committees come together and collaborate. They focus on their own sort of areas of interest. And tonight's event is planned jointly by both the Interiors Committee and the Architecture of Justice Committee. So I want to ask two of the folks from those committees who helped plan this to come up and introduce the evening and get us started. And those are Motoko Shiboji from the Architecture of Justice Committee and Carolyn Cirillo from Interiors. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Carolyn Cirillo, and I work on the Interiors Committee. And I actually saw this film at a Humanities in Architecture Film Festival, I think over the winter. And I think I ambushed Ultan, the filmmaker, right afterwards. And I said, we have to show this to the AIA. We just have to share with the design community. So I'm just so thrilled how this panel came together. And then working with Motoko on the Justice Committee, she asked, like, why is the Interiors Committee so interested in this? And when you think about it, for the incarcerated, the experience is completely interior. But it's also a social justice issue and a design issue. And we know how much design influences mental health. So you're going to hear from a great panel afterwards. And so thanks for coming. Here's Motoko. Sorry.
Sorry. So how can architects be better advocates for a better world? I'm Motoko Shiboji, the co-chair of the Architecture for Justice Committee for AIA New York. Our committee plans public events to create opportunity to re-examine what seems to be the society's norm. Tonight's event is a continuation of the Reimagining Justice Film Festival we held last year in May, and I'm sure that it's going to be very inspirational. Special thanks to fellow AIA New York committees including ENYA, Public Architecture, Design for Aging, Diversity and Inclusion, Social Science and Architecture, Design for Risk and Resiliency, as well as all of our speakers, including Ultan, the filmmaker, Diana, the director of New York City Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, and Stanley Richard, President and CEO of the Fortune Society, and Vivali Pryor, the Vice President and Senior Program Manager for New York City's BPJ program from AECOM Hill joint venture. So let's begin the film. Thank you.
It goes to so much of what those of us that are in the design of prisons and in the design of jails and in the world of justice reform are experiencing and thinking about all the time. So, wow, on the film. Ultan, would you like to kind of introduce yourself? And I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk about what they care about, what they're passionate about, why they do what they do.
Sure, thank you for that nice introduction. And I'm Ultan Guilfoyle, and I've been a filmmaker for, well, all of my life, really. And I'm not an expert on the criminal justice system or on prison design. I make films about art and architecture. So I'm really the other side of the world. But I dove into this at Frank's request. When Frank Gehry calls you up and asks you want to do something, you don't say no. So I found myself with a camera in prisons and following these students around Norway and Scandinavia and in their studios. And it was an amazing project. And I've been fortunate to work with Frank for over 30 years, actually. And this was the most recent thing we did together. We did this just before the pandemic, and it came out just about the time we all got consumed by the pandemic and forgot all about this.
Stanley Richards, President and CEO of the Fortune Society. I came to this work through my personal experience of incarceration. There was a time in my life where I cycled in and out of jail and prison and developed the ability to just live in that environment and think it was normal and thinking that that was what my life was going to be about. And it was during my last incarceration where I spent from 86 to 88 on Rikers Island and then ended up going upstate to prison. Went to school, and that changed my life. I realized that I wasn't the worst thing that I've ever done. I wasn't what society, by way of jail and prison and the community I came from, that I was destined to that life. And I made a commitment that when I came home, I wanted others to see and learn that they are not the worst thing and that they could break that cycle. And I came home, came to Fortune Society, and Fortune Society gave me an opportunity to give back. And I have been on that journey of giving back. And my commitment was to break the cycle of incarceration in my family. I went to prison, my baby sister went to prison, my brother went to prison. Both of them have passed away. And I made a commitment to make sure that my kids don't follow the path that I have. And when I got an opportunity to do work with the borough-based jail, I made a commitment to make sure that my grandchildren, I have 9 grandchildren, my grandchildren won't see Rikers as the stain on the city that it is right now. And I'm just thankful to be able to do this work and do it in partnership with partners like Deanna, and looking forward to the conversation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Deanna Logan, and I have the honor of leading a group of professionals at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We are a conglomerate of people, and it's very interesting because I think when everybody thinks about criminal justice, they think about police and handcuffs and arrests and courts. And when we think about it in how do we make community safer? How do we make the system operate efficiently but fairly, right? And we have worked towards looking at what is good government, and that's why partners like Stanley are absolutely essential, right? What does good government mean? Well, good government means that all of your citizens are given the ability to live in a community where they are valued. And how do we do that? Well, part of it is working with all of our partners and stakeholders, but most of it is listening to the community itself. And so I come to this work in a very weird roundabout way. I didn't know such an office existed when I was a student going to law school. I worked primarily in prosecution. So I started my career as a prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I moved into the private sector to be a private prosecutor for the New York Stock Exchange, where I went and said, oh, you violated the rules of the stock exchange. I started writing rules for the stock exchange, and then went and worked at the Department of Correction for a time to do internal discipline for officers who were abusing the rules. I got invited by Darcel Clark to come work for her and create a unit on Rikers, and then I really started to understand what I did, right? Like, that was a very, very different part of the system that I had never actually stopped to think about what it was. I got to walk the jails, I got to talk to people, and then I was introduced to Stanley and the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice by being invited to be on the Culture Change Committee at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And then I started to think about who we are as a society, what we do, and all of the people who need to be incorporated. And so this job is a labor of love, and it is what we need to think about as one society and how we're going to move forward with a better future.
Great, thank you. Stanley, do you want to add a little bit about your other experience with the Department of Corrections, or Correction in New York?
Yeah, I was in 2021, I was appointed to be the first deputy commissioner of the New York City Department of Corrections. So being incarcerated there, coming home, doing social service work, helping people rebuild their lives after incarceration, and then going to be the second highest ranking official in the New York City Department of Correction is a pretty wild journey. And people often ask me, how'd you do it? I said, I took all of me when I went and did the job. I said, part of what we do at the Fortune Society is we say we see the best in people before they see it in themselves. When I went to corrections, I didn't see officers and incarcerated people. I seen people. People who are primarily both black and brown in a system that is designed and structured to really inflict harm. And it doesn't do the job it was intended to do as a detention where people get their cases adjudicated. And so being able to do that work, being in that role, I was able to see all of what's happening, as Deanna said, all of what's happening out there. And my call right now for the borough-based jail is about building a jail that is centered on the humanity of everybody. And when I left the department, a 15-year officer wrote me a message that I still have today that said, in all my 15 years, I have never worked with someone where I learned as much as I've learned with you, and touched and said, you are a brother for life. And this is someone who a lot of officers in the union were saying, don't work with him. But he ended up working with me, and he wrote me that message. And that's about seeing the best in people, whether you're in greens or beiges or blues.
Great, thank you. I think it's probably odd for the moderator to introduce herself, but I feel like it would be helpful also to know that I relocated from California in order to work with this city of New York on its justice reform program. I had, as an architect, done public projects and had really started to specialize in justice projects, and had done design build in New York, planning to do design build. It just felt like this has my name on it, but it was really around the opportunity to make a big difference in justice, in justice reform, which was New York's vision, and it really came, as you said, from justice advocates getting together and saying we need to do something better, and what we've got currently is not what we want. And it's been an amazing, I tell people, even though I had decades of work on justice work, working in New York has taught me so much. And part of it has been our bringing in a human experience design consultant and the Department of Correction lead people saying, yes, you can go have conversations like you had, like Frank Gehry had and his team had, his students, in listening sessions with the currently incarcerated, the formerly incarcerated, the families of the people incarcerated, the staff that work in the facilities, and on and on and on. And those kinds of conversations, I really saw it in the students in the movie. They were touched by the human aspect and the human story, and it opened up their thinking in a different way, and that's what's happened for me, and that's a big part of our intention on the borough-based jails, is that people see things differently and open up in a different way, bring a different passion and caring. And I will just also say, since we saw Halden Prison and Balstoy in Norway, that both Stanley and I were part of a junket, one could call it, funded by, I think, the Ford Foundation to Norway and to Amsterdam to see that. And it was a group of 30 people from New York City, advocates, but also Department of Correction, Correctional Health, Mayor's Office, and the Department of Design and Construction to actually see and open up about a new way of thinking of things. So to that point, I am a real advocate for learning. And I think about how many people in here are students, like in colleges and
Thank you. Thank you for coming on your own time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have you here. And then how many of you as professionals consider yourself a student? Yeah, I think I'm based on my experience in New York City, I really think that having the beginner mind, yes, we need to be strong, we need to be, bring a lot of experience to the work we do, but opening your mind and being willing to learn new things and not be stuck in a certain kind of way of seeing things is really powerful. So, Oltan, I'm thinking, what do you see is the opportunity for students becoming professionals and professionals becoming students in listening and learning from the justice system?
Well, I may be the wrong person to ask, but I do want to pick up something that Stanley said. The prisons that we have in the United States are built for, first and foremost, to inflict harm on the people who live there and also who work there. So everybody who walks in those gates, some of them can go home that night, but they go out after one day damaged. If they're working there for one day, they are damaged when they go out. Now, somehow we have to break that way of approaching incarceration in this country, because that's not the way it's approached in other countries. So in other countries, first of all, the working conditions, and here I would point to the union and say, what on earth are the prison officers' unions doing in allowing the work conditions to be so bad that they have the highest rates of alcoholism, spousal abuse, and depression and suicide in the working population in this country? That's astonishing to me, that unions would allow their workers to work in those conditions. That's the first thing. Second thing is, we have to remove that idea that you have to break somebody once you put them inside. The very fact of incarceration, the very fact that somebody is taking away their freedom, that is a major, major punishment. And I'll tell you one anecdote. There was a social study in Sweden, where they looked for volunteers to check into a hotel for 2 weeks, but they couldn't leave. So they got volunteers, and the idea was you'd stay in your hotel room. It was locked. The door was locked. You get your meals every day, but there was television, there were showers, everything, all of that normal, but you were there on your own in solitary confinement. They got about 200 people to start the project. Not one finished the 2 weeks. Wow. Not one. So even for people who voluntarily agree to have their freedom taken from them, they couldn't hack it. And yet we don't just do that. We then go the next step and the next step to increase the punishment on the people that we put inside from every step of the way until they get out broken people. And it's amazing to me that Susan Burton and the women that we had in the film, that they've managed to rehabilitate themselves. Susan is a remarkable woman. She was incarcerated over the course of 20 years for various times, and mostly it was low-level drug offenses. And she had the worst possible beginning, in the sense that she was sitting at home in Compton watching her 6-year-old boy playing in the street, and he was knocked down and killed by an unmarked police car. And LAPD to this day has not acknowledged, even though she's done all the work, she knows who did it, she knows it was in the official records, but LAPD to this day has not acknowledged that incident. That sent her on a spiral of decline. That sent her into the incarceration and re-incarceration cycle that you've talked about. And yet she came back, and her big thing, Stanley, as you know, and Deanna, is that women coming out of incarceration are especially vulnerable. They're especially vulnerable because they can't, and often situations that, often the situations that their families have become broken up, their children are taken away from them, put in care, and so they don't have anywhere to go to. Or if they do, it's the kind of toxic environment that will force them back into reincarceration. So that was what Susan identified, and she started on a minimum wage job. She managed to buy herself a little house in Compton, and she went to the bus stop and literally took women getting off the bus and said, I've got a place for you to stay. Now she has about 30 homes around the country, maybe more, and she resettles thousands, has resettled thousands of women. So I just wanted to pick up on that one point, this idea of exponentially increasing the harm on the men and women that we incarcerate is really something that we have to stop.
And there's an additional piece to that when it comes to women. You go into the facilities, you go into the men's facility, mostly women are visiting the men. You go in the women's facility, the visiting room is basically empty. In this society, we punish women for going to jail, for being a mother, for being a woman. And then when they come home, they have less support than men have. Usually, men come home to a woman, and women come home to nobody. If they have children, they probably have an order against living with that child because they were incarcerated, so can't go back to the family. So there's a way in which, as you said, the structure of the system is designed to just leverage that kind of punishment on people that is hard to overcome.
I mean, we have been thinking about how we get to a place where reentry not only is looking at how people are coming back, but just the start of the process from the get-go, right? There's a wonderful gentleman. His name is Mr. Alex Anderson, and he runs the Reentry Theater of Harlem. And what he said to me was that incarceration for him was a ritual, but it was a ritual of dehumanization, and that everything about it stripped away all of the essence of what made him him going in. His name, his memories, his identity. He has a number, and almost all of the people that we've talked to and we work with in terms of coming back to community talk about the fact that they can still, even 10, 15 years after being incarcerated, rattle off the number that was their identity for such a long time while they were incarcerated. And coming back, they now have to figure out that pathway back to the person and the human that they were before we put them into the system. And so what we have been trying to do, and what we spent like the last 4 years focusing on, were the fundamentals, right? Like, how are we making sure that people have what they need in terms of a humane space to lay their head. Thank you, Fortune Osborne, and all the rest of our transitional. That not only gives you the place to lay your head, but also for your nervous system. And I think people don't understand what the nervous system response is for individuals who end up in our criminal legal system, right? And some of them already have. There are individuals whose nervous systems operate at a higher level of intensity than what we would consider being something that's problematic. A lot of people say, but we gave them a chance. We told them they had to be at that program and that's all they had to do. There was nothing else. What people don't understand is that for some individuals, that in and of itself is a stressor. Their nervous system goes into fight or flight. So we have worked to identify people in our system that need that extra support, and we've created pathways that have smaller groups that social workers work with. So there are 10 individuals that may be in the criminal legal system, and that they are working with clinicians that are at a higher level. So not simply individuals who are graduates of social work, but clinical social workers, in order to make sure that we are actually addressing the human. But additionally, we talk about things that other partners are working on, like music on the inside, moti, and how is it that people can reconnect to their humanity through the arts? Because I know a lot of people think arts and culture are a luxury, but they really aren't. When you think of music, when you think of beauty, trees, horticulture, all of the things that get your nervous system to relax, all of that is part of how we embrace folks so that they can come back and be one with themselves initially, right? Because that's the biggest part, and then one with the family, the communities that they now have to catch up to, and also help them with the world that they left behind is not the one that they're coming into. Just think about, I mean, those of us of a certain age have lived through many iterations of phones. I grew up, the phone was connected to a wall. My mother answered it, and I was lucky if she let me talk to the other person, right? Now I have it in my pocket, and I can figure out complex equations, Excel spreadsheets, and everything else on it. If I had gone into the system when I was that age and come out now, people don't know how to use it. And it is so integral to our society. Even going to McDonald's, you have to know how to use computers. So it is part of everything that we do. We are lifelong learners, and we learn from all of the people that we work with and that we support. And I encourage everybody to be that. I say to my kid all the time, it's like, the day I tell you I have nothing left to learn, it's time to pick out the crematorium, because it's time for me to go.
I was struck by the conversation about 50 years of, in a way, interventions that made our system what it is. Small interventions, and then being able to somehow dig out of that with small interventions. And I was in the pre-conversation, I was kind of asking, what's the architect's role in advocacy? And Alton, you talked about, I mean, I'd like, if you remember, you talked about how nobody can do everything.
Well, yeah, I think I think the question was, I think at some point there was an idea that the architects associations in America should tell their architects not to do any prison work until such time as the criminal justice system was better, something like that. And to me,
that's New York has done that.
well, which to me is ridiculous. I mean, you just stand back and wait until somebody else fixes the problem before you go and address it. No, everybody has to do their bit. And if you just absent yourself from the problem, you just step outside of the ring and say, I'm not going to get involved in that. Whew. I mean, how is the world going to be a better place if that's what your ambition is as an architect, to create buildings and spaces that will make the world a better place? Because that's truly what architects want to do. So everybody has a role, but at the same time, the architect is not somebody with on a white horse galloping over the horizon coming to fix everything. That's not realistic either. So people like Frank Gehry, you might say, have changed the world with their designs, but they didn't set out to do what they did with the idea of changing the world. They just wanted to make better work for themselves and for their clients. And by doing so, build up a body of work that eventually changes the world. So I think what we all have to do is, as James Foreman, who's an amazing man as well in Yale, is just do a little bit, talk about it, think about it, help. And particularly at the moment, because part of the conversation going the wrong direction is that if you have this move to greater punishment, greater punitive measures against people who are incarcerated, if the conversation still keeps going that way, it tends to amplify itself. It becomes an echo chamber where it becomes more and more and more and more. That's what happened over 50 years. And in the last 10 months, we've really seen that happen with what's going on in the immigration space, where we're not talking about uniformed police officers using process to pick people up. We're talking about masked men picking people up the streets. I mean, we're in a different world now. But nevertheless, we still, all of us, have to think about how it would it be if one of our family members was incarcerated and what the conditions are they're going to face and how they could be made better. And I think that's what we have to do bit by bit, just small things.
Yep, it's all about a critical inch, right? You look at, if you look at the picture now, you know, you could say, man, we still have so much more work to do. And that's true, we do have a lot of work to do. But if you look back, and Michael Jacobson talked about this on the film, when I was in the system, there was 20,000 people incarcerated in New York City jails, right? We've seen the numbers go up recently. We're a little over 7,000, but there was 20,000 people in New York City jails. There was 72,000 people incarcerated in New York State prisons. We've already closed 12 prisons, and 5 more prisons are scheduled to be closed this year, according to the governor, right? And so where we have 30,000, 32,000 people incarcerated in our New York State prisons, right? So we have made those critical inches. And I think when we're talking about with the borough-based jail and the role of architecture, it's about everybody doing their piece that adds to that critical inch. That, as one of the film folks said, 50 years to get us to the 2.3 million. And it's going to take us some time to get to a place where we have a small enough footprint where we could begin to think about things differently. But it starts from 2 fronts. One is around architecture, jail design, building jails that are centered on the humanity. But it also starts with addressing the American cultural need for punishment, for revenge, for eye. We have to fundamentally address that because that is at the core. When you look at how people end up in the system and what the system does to it, it's all about punishment. And when we went to Norway, one of the things they said, the first thing before they started talking about design, they said they had to change the underpinning of their constitution that said, wait a minute, jail and prison and the conditions are not part of the punishment. The punishment is the removal from your community. The job of the institution is to make sure when you leave this institution, you don't come back. That's their job. And they changed it with their job description. Their training is 2 years. Their job descriptions for what they call contact officers looks like a job description for a social worker. And that's about changing the underpinning values of how we think about the criminal legal system right now. And so those are the 2 fronts I think we really need to continue to push for. And I love what Deanna says all the time. The work that we are doing together is public safety. It is public safety.
Absolutely. And, you know, when I think about borough-based jails, a lot of what people talk about is ensuring the connection, the human connection between individuals that have to be there and the family that they're leaving behind. I think a nuance that people don't think about, that I often think about, is the fact that we are no longer removed, right? Rikers Island is just that. It's an island. And I don't know if most people understand the history of it, but it is the navigable waterways that make it the jurisdiction of the Bronx. Because way back when, the only way to get there was a barge from the Bronx. And then they built this bridge. And now that's the only way in and the only way out. And it's referred to as a bridge of no return in some cases. But it makes it so removed, and it contains it as other. And it's other people, other worries, everybody else. When the borough-based jails are built, it is now part of the community. There is community space that's going to be in all of the borough-based jails, but it also means that the mom who's pushing her stroller to go and visit the person that is now incarcerated is going to be seen by the community. And the baby in the stroller that's giggling and that waves at the people who live in the neighborhood as they're going by to get on the bus to go home or to walk to go home is also going to be seen as part of the community. And it will reinforce that these are our neighbors and that somehow we are going to have to figure out how we work together for them to be back as neighbors. The Department of Correction started in Massachusetts, the concept, right? And that's why in New York City, there's no S on it, because that was the job, to correct behavior. And probation and parole were all things of neighbors vouching for neighbors, saying, I know they made a mistake, but if you give them the opportunity to stay in community, I will assure you that they will learn from that mistake. Somewhere we've lost the concept of learning from your mistakes, because for me, there's nobody that's a throwaway person. And so when we understand that and we continue to make sure that the structures that we build, along with the communities that we build, have that underpinning, then we're on the right track.
I was excited about being asked to moderate this panel, and so I was sharing about it with an architect that has built a career in the justice world. And he's like, oh, I saw the movie in Washington, D.C. The AIA there had put it on. He said it was really, fantasy land, and was kind of poo-pooing the messages of the movie. So I'm curious about your thought of, are there kernels of possibility? Is it a possible reality? Yeah.
I think because I know you went to Norway, Stanley went to Norway, you got to go to Norway. I did not get to go to Norway. And I can say,
Everybody should go to Norway.
I didn't get a ticket. I wasn't
Preferably
with the
not to
Oprah crowd.
jail.
You get to Norway, you get to Norway. I didn't get to Norway. But I think, and this is a conversation we started having over here over popcorn. You were eating the sweet popcorn, I was eating the salty one. The issue is what Stanley started talking about, right? The fundamental changing of the Constitution and the understanding. And we don't have that here right now, right? Our penal system is predicated on a very different system. Our culture is also a very different system, right? We're in a setup where the understanding is that people have to work for things, right? You have to do. There's a priest on Instagram that had a very interesting, he's taking a sabbatical, and he's like, and I'm gonna do absolutely nothing. And you know why I'm gonna do absolutely nothing? Because I am a human being, not a doer, not a human doer. And we have to remember that just the very existence of being human means that you are entitled and you're okay. And that level of entitlement is not a bad thing. And I think that's where Norway has already, they're in a different space than we are. And until we get to a space where we say everybody in America is entitled to a basic understanding of what it is to be a human being, that you are entitled to homes, you are entitled to be able to eat and to get medical care and all of the things that we say fundamentally as human beings you need to exist, then it is going to be hard for us to get to a place where you're like, yeah, and folks now are in a community setting where they have the steak knives because that was the thing, right? Like, I could not imagine, and you can tell me if you think differently, Stanley, but I could not imagine having a kitchen on Rikers Island or in any jail in the United States right now where there was a butcher knife that was readily available for use, right? Because culturally, that probably would put us in a lot of danger. But
Well,
And Norway had it.
Norway had it. I mean,
Norway had
some of the footage from Bastoy of them using saws and an axe, I mean, that's the real world. But we were in the maximum security prison, Holden, and I was walking, we were filming around, I was walking into one of the housing units, and there was a young man with a steak knife, with a chopping knife, chopping vegetables as fast as he could. So we went in and chatted, and he said, well, we're having a party tonight for our group. There's 6 of them in this unit, because one of them is leaving next week. He gets out after 10 years, and he's going actually to Bastoy. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, is the prison getting together? And he said, no, we're just doing this ourselves. He was charged with cooking the big celebration dinner. I said, where is the guy? He said, oh, he's visiting his mother. He was outside visiting his mother, and he was coming back for his going away party. So there's that level of trust as well. So that even though this is a maximum security prison, much of the rehabilitation work is training people how to re-entry, how to be fully functioning citizens in the real world, which we all want them to be in the end anyway, because if a person is coming back into society, the assumption is it's going to be he or she is going to be living there, and I'm living here. Well, I want them to be a good neighbor. So it's in my interest to make sure that they do well. And of course, as Deanna says, that's not the culture here, but that is the culture in other places, and we have to change our thinking in order for it to happen here.
Sitting next to you on the subway, right?
And part of it is, like for me, and Michael Jacobson said this, is he's an optimist. You got to be hopeful, right? And one of the things we say at Fortune Society is we want to treat people the way you would want to be treated or your family member would want to be treated. It's that basic. And so as we go about doing this work and we talk about that critical inches, it's like, how do we show up in the world? How do we show up? Do we show up saying that this is too hard or this will never change, and so we stay in the way that we've always been? Or do we say, what could we envision, and then work toward making that vision a reality? And I'll end with this. Like, my wife always says to me, I speak to everybody, like I'm like that guy, right? And she's like, man, people don't even speak back to you. You still say hello. I said, you know why? It's not because I want a response from them. It's because it matters to me. Because when I see them, I'm not going to pretend I don't. I'm going to show up in the world the way I want people to show up. So I'm going to say good morning to you every morning, even if you're never speaking. Maybe one day you'll speak back. But that's where we're at, and that's what we need to do. Let's not show up the way that we've always shown up. Let's show up in the way that we want the world to show up. And that is with humanity, with seeing the best in people, really living out the values that we profess to have as a country. That's the work that we need to do.
Maybe on that note, we open it up to some questions from the audience. I see one in the far back. Yeah. Oh, hi, Hugh. Use the microphone, please.
I've spent all my career working on jails primarily, but also courthouses and a couple of prison projects. And like Beverly, I would push back on what was stated about intentionality of harm. I have never designed a facility intended to punish or never designed a facility intended to harm. It has always been to mitigate harm, reduce harm. Okay, and this is ascribed to us, and was ascribed to us when I was the chair of the committee for Architecture for Justice here at AIA, that we as architects intended to harm people, and they would not take it out of the letter that they wrote that demonized justice architects. I spent 4 years working on the LA County justice system, trying to improve that system. I have been working for almost 10 years here in New York City, trying to improve conditions of confinement in every bed in the entire New York City justice system, juvenile and adult. And I have never done that. So you can tell that I'm very emotional about this. I just have to say that, and I have to say that on behalf of the architects that have been working in the justice realm, that we are not demons that are attempting to hurt people through our designs. Quite the opposite. Now, the real question. That was a statement, now a question.
Oh.
I am scared to death that the borough-based jail system will be facilities that are designed to improve people's lives, but that the organizational culture of the people running it will not be enough to make those facilities other than Rikers in the boroughs. And this is counter to my best interest to stand up and say that, because my living is working on these facilities, and I am working on one of the borough-based jails. So I am incredibly interested in hearing from Deanna and from Stanley, how is the culture of the Department of Corrections going to be able to be changed so that these facilities operate the way intended by the architects to actually mitigate harm and to improve outcomes?
I think we're going to tag team on this one, right,
Yes,
Stanley?
yes,
So we are, as the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, reconstituting the Culture Change Committee that I actually got brought into the office. That's how I got introduced to the office. And part of it is ensuring, because I'm with you, none of us here who do this work day in, day out want to essentially lift Rikers and put it in the boroughs in smaller venues, right? Overall, part of that means that it is what is the programmatic work that we're doing. We have started making sure that with our partners at Correction Now, the RFPs that they worked on brought in partners in for programmatic work, but also looking at how we are supporting officers and understanding what that looks like. And that's the hardest part, right? Because I know that when I was the assistant commissioner for trials and litigation in correction, that we had officers who came in and they were hired social workers. Like, you literally took people out of social work school and they went through training, and before they actually got into the jail, they came in and they, with every intention of being a, I'm gonna change people's lives, I'm gonna do things for the better. And after a month in a facility, that drive was changed by whatever fear, and part of that fear may have been the location and not enough staffing and seeing an incident that was really, really scary. And so the biggest challenge is, how do we keep the humanity of the people that come in with the best of intentions in the work, doing the work the way that they wanted to do the work when they signed up for the job in the first place.
Right. Thank you, Deanna, for that. And I think, thank you for your statement, right? Because when we talk about, at least for me, when I talk about system, I'm not talking about the design. I'm talking about the entire system that's designed to inflict harm on everybody, right? Officers and incarcerated people and their families. So thank you for that statement, and thank you for working on the borough-based jail project. I'm also part of the Lippman Commission, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Lippman Commission, but in our report, we put down the steps that need to take place in order to fundamentally change the culture and the operations of the Department of Corrections. So what we don't have is 4 mini Rikers Island, right? And so we hope that this administration, or whatever administration is next, really take that blueprint and begin to implement it, as Deanna said, with some of the stuff that's already happening around cultural change, and make the investments necessary to bring about that change in culture. And I'll end by saying this: hurt people hurt people. You have officers who may, when they first come in, they want to make a difference. 2 minutes in, they know that this society doesn't care about them either. You look at their work conditions. You look at their locker rooms. I've seen better high school and junior high school locker rooms than what the officers have there. And when we talk about building, the designs that we're seeing now in the borough-based jail is factoring in everybody, so everybody's humanity. So the more that we could begin to change the cultural aspect of it, the more we can use design to change and communicate the value of those who work there and those who are incarcerated there, the more that we could sort of rise the tide so every boat rises, the more and the better we'll be. But it will take leadership from this city to make sure that happens.
And part of our office is capital team, and my architect is standing right there smiling at me, so I hope I'm not embarrassing him, because, you know, he's the expert.
I think I've got. Thank you for the program. Both the film and Beverly, you on the panel mentioned what's happened over the past 50 years. I was there, actually there 50 years ago, as you might guess from the color of my hair, reading books.
I'm sorry, you were where 50 years ago?
I was a young architect 50 years ago, and reading and practicing, and reading books about prison reform at the same time as reading Safdie's book, Beyond Habitat. Began putting sort of two and two together. Did some further research, got my firm in Cambridge to partner with Grusin here in New York. We actually won a maximum security prison in Massachusetts, in Concord. I had the opportunity of going and visiting many prisons, and I would have to say for anybody here in the audience who has not visited a maximum security prison, even 50 years ago, you will never, ever forget it. But at the time, there were books that are probably way out of print that were very much about many of the things that you're talking about. I looked at many of them, and they were very much about co-housing. They were about many topics about preparing prisoners for the step outside the prison for life ahead. So my question is, did any of that ever get built? And if they did, why didn't that resume? Because that, I remember in the early 70s, mid-70s, that was a very, very big topic. Very much along the lines of all of what I'm seeing in the film. And it's a shame that so much of that seems to be lost right now.
Think about the 70s, and you could go back 50 years from now, and that was maybe the beginning of the drip, drip, drip of small interventions that made the system what it is now. Yeah, the inhumane
Just
system.
I think it's a really interesting question, and particularly from somebody who was involved in design and building a prison. Take any building and double its population, then double its population again, then double its population again. The building is no longer fit for purpose. As soon as you start doing that, you start abusing the very fabric of the place that you're hoping that will work as successfully in the way that you just described. So I think that's one of the problems, is that over 50 years, this exponential growth in the prison population in this country, so that we come to the point where we have a third of the world's population and a quarter of the world's incarcerated population, or something. No, it's much worse than that. But don't worry about the statistic. But the point is, we really created a system that was impossible. The buildings could not function as for what their original intention was. And that just is the good ones. The bad ones were hellholes 50 years ago, and they're still hellholes.
Yeah, I do think that if you design for a certain population and then you have mass incarceration, I don't know if you caught it, but in the film, one of the women talked about that they were bunks first, and then they doubled the bunks so that they were 4-tier, and it was stifling. And that's essentially it. You designed a structure that was going to accommodate a number of people. I mean, just think about if you had a natural disaster where a Holiday Inn is supposed to only have 200 people, but now everybody's got houses and been wiped away somewhere, and now you've got to all accommodate them. At that moment, it's all hands on deck, and wherever you can fit people, you do. And I think that's what happened to the system. And even with the design being, not accommodating the bigger population, there was also not the investment in the system itself. So a lot of the correctional training and officers, there were lots of classes that just didn't happen. New York City in 2016 finally brought in classes of correction officers. So you had attrition, and officers who knew how to do the job and officers who didn't know how to do the job. and then now you're trying to bring in to catch up for people who are retiring, cycling. You don't have enough people to actually be in charge of care, custody, and control. And so what do? You do the only thing that you can. I'm gonna lock you in a cell and keep me safe, and everybody just gets locked in big, big masses. And when it's hot, because most of the jails on Rikers don't have climate control, right? So now think about what you're on the subway and you're irritated in the summer because it's 102 degrees, but you know you're getting off. What happens if I've got a whole bunch of people in an area, same 102 degrees, with the knowledge that I'm not leaving here anytime soon? If we're not investing in not only the location, but the ability to have programmatic work that's going on, the violence rises with the lack of programmatic work, the lack of services. The violence reduces when you start to see, there was a canine program, there's a culinary program, there was horticulture. People had access to, there was investment in that whole humanity. When that investment goes away, then you get what you just raised in your question, which is a place that may have been designed for a certain amount of people that now no longer has all of the things that it should.
And I think what you asked and what you described is an example of where good ideas, good intention goes to die when the loudest voices demonizes our neighbors and the people in various communities. And that's what happened. And that's why the work for us right now is we all have to go in and we all have to have voice and we have to move this critical inch forward. Because if we don't, good voices, good people, good ideas will absolutely die. And if you look at what's happening right now, it's happening.
I wanted to ask about the increasing use of the private prisons and what kind of.
Can people hear in the back?
Can you hear
Maybe
the question in the back?
get the microphone.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask about the privatization of prisons that's increasing across the country and what kind of design ethos is being applied there.
Private prisons, for me, is a major problem, right? Because their contracts are designed to detain, and there's incentives in that contract. There's not incentives for making sure that those prisons are designed with humanity. Some of them may be designed like that, but how they operate versus the design is a real, real problem. And the idea that somehow private prisons is the solution is the wrong way to go. And what we've seen over the years is that we can have a smaller footprint in mass incarceration and still have safe cities. We do not have to have, like, mass incarceration and private prison industrial complex does not equal safer communities. It just doesn't. And I think in this country, for a long time, that was the message and people bought into it. I know in my community, Black and brown communities, people were harmed by crime, right? The crime I committed in my community, I harmed my community. I hope I'm making amends through the work that I'm doing right now. And the bill of goods that was sold to the community was, we're gonna lock these people up, take them out, because they're bad people. You ain't gonna never have to worry about them again. But the reality of it is people come home. And if you incarcerate people in the kind of conditions we're talking about, they don't come home a zero. They come home either further broken, and it's harder to sort of reintegrate, or not. And so private prisons, it just is not the answer for me.
Do you want to add anything onto that? Nope. All right. Yes. There, and then in front of you afterwards.
What a great panel. I wanted to ask Olton, like, if he had any postscript of any of the students or the programs we were talking about earlier, about what was happening at the schools, or if you saw it rolled out anywhere else, or kind of a follow-up since you've made the film.
Well, you know, it came out, or we finished it just as the big pandemic was hitting, and so the schools shut down, and students and we all went through the pandemic, so we know what happened. So it was difficult. Shannon, are you still here? Wave your hand if you are. Yeah, Shannon McGoldrick was one of the students at Yale, and is now now works for Robert A.M. Stern, one of the most famous architects in the world. Shannon, do you hear any conversations about this work that you did, that you were involved in back then? Do you want to stand up and speak up?
Yeah, let's get the mic. Get the mic, please. Hold on.
I told you I was going to embarrass you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for standing up to speak.
Of course. I think about it very often, and it was so wonderful to see the film again. I don't know if I'd ever seen it fully, and so it's like incredibly moving, even to have visited these places firsthand and to have spoken to the people that were in the film firsthand. Again, my goodness, it's quite a lot, and what an encouraging thing to hear all of your stories too, even your career trajectories, sort of having started one place and kind of found your way to this work that you're doing, that it's a long story, and each sort of little step that you take, and I know this has been said sort of by the panel too, to be thinking about these things and find little ways to contribute is tremendously meaningful. So again, I agree, Alton, the film was lovely, and it was so nice to see it fully, and I was very glad to hear from all of you. It's been very nice to be here.
Thank you, Shannon. Well, I did want to answer your question, Carolyn. We had a screening a while ago, and some people from Yale, current students from Yale, came, and they said that the program had been canceled, and it didn't survive the pandemic. But what they did tell me was that it opened up a conversation to a bigger program about social justice and design. And so that it wasn't specific to prison design, but it was specific to many of the problems that are created by the social justice system and the criminal justice system in this country. So I think that's a positive. I think that is being grasped. And I wonder, our architect friend who spoke so eloquently, you come from that and you're working in that now. So clearly, not specifically this program, but clearly this idea is very much of the moment. And it's going to go forward. It's kind of unstoppable. And you can hear the evidence from the people who are working it day by day. This is a strong movement, and it has to continue, because as a society, we won't survive if we don't fix this.
Thank you. And then we'll go back. Right, you'll be next.
Thank you all. My question is a little bit more for Deanna, and it's a bit of a design problem. So it's not just the borough-based jails, but how do you transition, or what concrete steps are being taken to take the guards and to take those who are incarcerated and prepare them for the transition for the new jails? And is that actually happening right now?
So transitioning into the new jails is not the work with the people that are in the jails now, partly because jail is, in theory and by law, a temporary status, right? If you are sentenced to jail, by law, it means that you have a sentence that is a year or less. The anomaly under the law is if you are convicted of 2 misdemeanors and sentenced to consecutive sentences, then you could, in theory, be sentenced to 2 years, and that should be the longest time. What we're doing now is we see case processing having very slow times. Homicides do not have a statute of limitation, and so those cases tend to sit because they are more complicated and they just take longer to do. And as we look at case processing, we're seeing individuals who have been on Rikers Island 2 or 3 years, and their case hasn't gotten anywhere close to trial. So right now, what we're doing is working with the Office of Court Administration to figure out where are those log jams, where are the places that we need to clear them so that individuals are getting their fair trial in the time frame that the law really expects them to do that. In terms of thinking about the borough-based jails and the planning, it is how we look at reentry. So coming up, and this is going to be a plug, so get ready, October 3rd, we have Justice in Motion. And that convening is in the Armory in Harlem. And what it does is it brings all of our stakeholders together who are boots on ground. So a lot of times it's ta-da moments, and I get a lot of the big wigs who want to come out and talk, but this is a working group. So there are working groups that are happening right now for people with serious mental illness, because we know in our population right now we have almost 2,000 people incarcerated on Rikers that are suffering from serious mental illness. So it's clinicians, it's the social workers who are working with people in supervised release, it's all of the partners, and we're sitting down and we're starting to map out what that roadmap looks like. So it is, how are we reducing the population as we're building the borough-based jails so that we are going to be having individuals incarcerated that are the ones that we know need to be in custody as they navigate through the criminal legal system, but looking at women, looking at all of the various populations, figuring out how we can have people navigate their cases in community to reduce the population, and then for the people who are going to be in the borough-based jails, what does that programming look like? Which one of the partners are coming in to work with individuals to get them ready for, and it may be both, right? It may be, we need to get you ready because you're gonna have a bigger timeout of society, because whatever your case is gonna sentence you to prison. And what does that look like for you? And then what does it look like if you're going to be coming back to community much sooner?
Thank you. The blonde woman who had her hand
Who's
up
been raising
before
her hand
her.
with the glasses.
Beverly,
Yeah,
you need the
stand up
microphone.
and get the
can
microphone.
I just ask one question about
Wait a minute.
the mentally ill? The Lippman report said people that have real psychological problems shouldn't be incarcerated. Is there any thought of a different kind of facility that detains people that are harmful, but really addresses their mental needs?
So I get
Can you
very,
repeat the question?
oh yeah, so the question was, I was talking about there is a significant number of people that have serious mental illness that are on Rikers, and the Lippman Commission pointed out, the Lippman Commission report says those individuals should not be in a carceral setting. And there are smaller projects that are working to support those people. The challenge is the way that our society treated people with mental health historically was very dehumanizing and very warehousing, right? They were crammed in boxes and they did not actually get care. They were kept away. And so now the current setup is that to give care and to get Medicaid funding, it's no more than 16 people. And in New York, that means, where are we going to be able to deliver that kind of care in order to access it, and how do we set that up to make sure that we are actually treating people? There is a project in the Bronx that's Hope House, and they are working to have that type of clinical setting, but again, it is 16 people, and we're talking almost 2,000. And the biggest challenge is making sure that you're giving care, but you're able to scale up what that care looks like to address the needs that are ridiculously high.
And we have, in the Lippman report and in the Closed Rikers agreement, to create those outposted beds for people with behavioral health, to pull those people out of the system.
But your biggest challenge too, and this is the one thing that we all have to think about, is it's not just a bed and it's not just a room. It is the people who actually deliver the care. And right now, we're not graduating them. We're not graduating them in the number that we need. And so what we're seeing is a lot of cycling. So it's the capitalist system of, well, I'm gonna pay you this much more, and then you're gonna leave me and you're gonna come to me, and then you'll stay for a little while, and then somebody else is gonna pay you this much more. We need to figure out as a society how we are paying very livable wages to people who are delivering care under very tough circumstances, so that we can attract more talent into the field to be able to address the need that is not getting any less.
Thank you. Thanks for the
She has the
question.
mic.
All right, she has the mics.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. I really hope we can see some of these visions come to life, and what the students designed and the systems in Norway. On the flip side of that, I know there's been a lot of pushback out of Chinatown in particular about the borough-based jails, and I'm just wondering how you're working with those communities and like taking their concerns into account.
So cue Mary, who's standing there looking at me smiling, who is the architect in charge at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, does a lot of the work. He and his team will be in community answering the questions with our partners from DDC as we talk about what this is going to mean, not only for the individuals who have to work in the Manhattan Borough-based facility and the people who will be housed there, but also for the community, right? So it's still, I'm right that they are still in the design phase?
Yes.
Right? So they're still in the design phase, but that is part of embracing the community so that they also have a say in what that community space is going to bring to their neighborhood. Because I do think we have to just do a better job of explaining how it's not taking away from the neighborhood, that this is bringing to the neighborhood. It is bringing its own level of resources and its own level of activation of the space, right? I don't know about you, but I worked at Manhattan DA's office, and that street on Baxter Street, after a certain time, it got really sketchy, and I would be really afraid to run out of the office to go and grab something to eat. And as we're designing and building, it's activating the space. You're going to have people walking. You're going to have light. You're going to have a beautiful area that people will be proud to have in their neighborhood. It's not going to be something that's detracting the way that community thinks it is. And so we just have to get better at answering those questions and really giving the vision of what is coming to their community.
We're down to the last 7 minutes, and we actually need to be out of here at 8 o'clock. So we'll just do one last. Who's going to be the one last? All right, in the back there, and then we'll need to wrap it up and thank everybody for being here.
Hi. So I work with Stan at the Fortune Society, but my purview is the digital space. Teaching people digital skills, helping people get reintroduced to the digital society that we're in. But as you're talking about like the feasibility of actually designing these spaces, and in particular redesigning old spaces, I wonder if there's any feasibility for designing virtual spaces that sort of I mean, of course, don't accomplish all of the same goals, but maybe accomplish some of them, maybe create spaces for people to escape, or spaces for people to visit with their families that they would otherwise have a challenge doing, you know, especially with increased use of AI design or virtual reality design. Is any thought being put toward trying to meet halfway and not necessarily physically redesign the spaces, but redesign them virtually?
Yeah, right now there's limitations because of there just isn't Wi-Fi strength on Rikers. But when we're in community, that is definitely a possibility. Even now on Rikers, people have tablets, and we have been working to figure out ways that those tablets can be utilized better for connection, focusing primarily on their ability to communicate with their counsel and to get their cases ready for trial. But I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you that, you know, there may be times where we have VR headsets so that people are able to think about, you know, navigate how they're going to re-enter, because they can do simulations within their own space as they're serving their sentence or as they're navigating their criminal cases, that they can have access to that.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about is using technology to manage the jail. As you've seen on the film, everything was sort of lock and key. Right now, to have movement from the person go from the housing area to a clinic, it takes an officer, maybe sometimes two officers. So incorporating technology that would allow movement, free movement, where you could still monitor, using technology where officers do rounds, and now it's all paper. If they do a round, they got to write it in their logbook to track the kind of operations, the jail operations. We are very hopeful that that kind of technology is leveraged. And to get to your question, maybe it's not time to answer it now, but for us to think about, for you to think about, Beverly, are the design teams right now using AI to help build out the borough-based jails, the models? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure technology is part of it. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that we are using technology now, right? So when we're talking about reentry and what that looks like, we recently started a pilot with commercial driver's license. The first part of the program is in fact virtual, and it allows individuals to go at their own pace, right? So we had one graduate who was very motivated, and the virtual part of the training class is a 6 to 8 week course that they go at their own pace, they test, they do, and then they move forward. That graduate finished it in 4 weeks because he had been in transitional housing for 2 years, and he saw this as a way of giving him the ability to take care of his family and himself. And so part of right now that the pilot was for 20 people, we just got greenlit to expand to 300 people, and yay us. That's some good advocacy in motion. But it also gives the opportunity for individuals that have been sentenced on Rikers to use the tablets to think about, oh, this may be a career that I want, so that they've already gotten a jump start on what life would look like for them when they're coming back to community.
What I liked about the question is that it goes to the beginning of the film and the end of the film, where there was a focus on the need for imagination. And that question challenges us to expand our imagination. So I just want to thank our wonderful panelists, Alton, Stanley, Deanna, for, I hope, a really engaging conversation. And thank you to the AIA, thank you to the Interiors Design Committee for bringing this to all of us. And I'm sorry, I mean, we can meet out on the street and keep the conversation going.